Inez Thompson, 78 years old, had always been a devoted mother and wife. Living in a quiet town in Missouri, she raised 3 beautiful children with her husband, Harold. Their lives seemed ordinary, a simple family in the suburbs. But life, as she would soon realize, was anything but ordinary. The day her joy was shattered started like any other, with the sun rising over her peaceful backyard. Inez was in the kitchen, humming a soft tune while preparing breakfast for her children. But something in the air was different today. It felt heavier, like the calm before a storm. As she carried a tray of toast and eggs to the dining table, her youngest son, Michael, came running in with tears in his eyes. "Mom, it's Dad," Michael stammered. He sold them.
He sold them, Mom.
They're gone." Inez's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, gone? Who's gone?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The twins," he whispered, barely able to form the words. "He sold them. He sold them to Mr. Harper." Inez froze, the weight of the words sinking in. Her world, the one she had painstakingly built with Harold, crumbled in an instant. The joy of motherhood was ripped away from her, and she felt like she was suffocating. Harold had sold their babies, her precious twins, to a man she barely knew. How could he do this? The love she had for her children had always been her anchor, the thing that held her together, and now, it was all slipping through her fingers. How long had this been happening? How had she been so blind? With shaking hands, Inez dropped the tray of food, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to do next, how to confront Harold, or what she even had left. As her mind spiraled, a bitter truth gnawed at her. Her husband, the man she had trusted with everything, had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. But what had driven Harold to do something so monstrous? Why hadn't he told her? And what would she do now? Inez couldn't let this stand. She would get her babies back. She had to. But as she looked at Michael, whose face was pale with fear, she knew it wouldn't be easy. What had Harold promised in exchange for their children? What kind of man had he become? With a heavy heart, Inez wiped away a tear, determined not to let her family fall apart. She would fight, even if it meant confronting the darkest truths about her marriage. But first, she needed answers. Inez sat at the edge of the bed, her mind racing as she struggled to process what Michael had just revealed. The twins, her sweet daughters, only a few months old, gone.
Sold.
How could Harold do this? The man she had loved and built a life with. The father of her children. For years, he had been her rock, and now, it seemed as though he was nothing more than a stranger. Her hands were still trembling, the shock of the revelation making it hard to breathe. She couldn't make sense of it. The house felt suffocating. The walls that had once echoed with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny feet now stood silent, oppressive. The air was thick with betrayal. She could feel Michael's eyes on her as he waited for her response. He was only 10, too young to understand the gravity of what had just happened, but old enough to feel the coldness of the situation. Inez reached out and gently pulled him close, hugging him tight. "I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't want you to hear that. It's not your fault," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Are we going to get them back, Mom? Please tell me we will." Michael's voice cracked with desperation. Inez pulled away slightly, looking him in the eyes. "We will, Michael. I don't know how yet, but I promise you we will." Her mind began to swirl with plans, each one more reckless than the last. She couldn't sit idly by. She couldn't just let Harold get away with this. He had crossed a line, and there was no turning back now. But how? Where would she even begin? The first thing Inez knew she had to do was confront Harold. But as she walked through the house, she realized he wasn't there. The silence was eerie, unsettling. Where had he gone? And why had he left so suddenly? She reached the kitchen, hoping to find a clue, but the only thing that greeted her was the empty coffee cup he had left behind, a faint trace of his cologne still lingering in the air. A small, twisted part of Inez wanted to scream, to pound on the walls until they caved in. The pain was so raw, so fresh, but she forced herself to breathe. She needed clarity. The doorbell rang, jolting her from her thoughts. She hadn't expected company, but when she opened the door, she found a man standing there, wearing a sharp suit and an unreadable expression on his face. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes calculating. "I'm Daniel Harper. I believe you, and I have some business to discuss." Inez's stomach churned. This was the man who had bought her babies. This was the man who had taken them from her. Her voice was steady, but beneath it, there was an unmistakable tremor. "You have no business with me, Mr. Harper." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think we do. You see, I've been told to make a few arrangements. You may be surprised, but this wasn't an easy decision. Your husband and I have been in talks for some time now, and I believe he'd want you to consider what's best for your family." Inez clenched her fists. She wanted to shout, to demand answers. But she couldn't give him that satisfaction. She needed to play this carefully. She needed to be strong. "What do you want?" she asked through gritted teeth. Harper's smile widened, as if he'd been waiting for her to ask that very question. "I want you to understand, Mrs. Thompson, that this is all for the best. There's much more at stake here than just a family's future. There are deals to be made, money to be made, and I'm in the business of making money." Inez's breath hitched. Was he admitting to something? Was Harold involved in something deeper than she realized? "I don't care about your business deals, Mr. Harper," Inez replied sharply. "What I care about are my children. Where are they? What have you done with them?" The man's face hardened. "I think we should leave it at that for now. But I'll be in touch soon. You'll have to decide what kind of future you want, Mrs. Thompson." With that, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Inez standing in the doorway, her heart racing, her mind reeling with the weight of the conversation. What had she just heard? And what was he really after? The sound of the door closing behind Mr. Harper echoed in the hallway, leaving a trail of uncertainty and fear. Inez stood frozen for a moment, her heart thundering in her chest as the weight of his words settled in. A man like him didn't just get involved in something as personal as this without having an agenda. What kind of business could her husband, Harold, possibly be mixed up in? And why had he involved their children in such a transaction? The questions swirled around her, each one more terrifying than the last. Inez took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. She couldn't let panic take over, not now. She had to be strategic, had to think clearly. The twins were out there somewhere, and she needed to find them. But how? Where could she even begin? She couldn't turn to Harold, not after what she'd just learned. And Mr. Harper? He was a man of power, of wealth. A man who had just used her family as a pawn in some twisted game. Inez paced back and forth in the living room, her mind working overtime, trying to come up with a plan. Her gaze landed on the phone resting on the coffee table. Maybe she could find something on Harold's phone, some sort of clue. But no, she couldn't risk it. Harold would surely have erased everything by now. She would need to think of something else. Suddenly, the phone rang, cutting through her thoughts. Inez's heart skipped a beat. Was it Harold? Mr. Harper? Someone with news about the twins? She grabbed the phone, her fingers trembling as she answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, cold, and precise. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Detective Harris with the local police. I understand you've been trying to find your children." Inez's stomach twisted.
Yes.
"Yes, I have. Please, can you help me? My babies, my twins, they've been taken. I need to know where they are." Detective Harris's voice softened, though there was still an underlying tension. "We've been investigating a case involving your husband, Mrs. Thompson. It seems there's more to his dealings than you know. We've traced some of his recent activities, and we believe he's been involved in some illegal transactions." Inez's heart stopped. Illegal transactions? What did that mean for her children? What kind of transactions? What does this have to do with my children? "There's been a lot of money changing hands, Mrs. Thompson, and we've identified several individuals who may be involved in this business arrangement. But I need your help. We need you to come down to the station to discuss what you know about your husband's activities." Inez felt her knees weaken as the full weight of the situation hit her. Harold hadn't just sold their children. He had sold them to someone with ties to criminal activity, someone who had used her family in ways she could never have imagined.
I
don't know what to do, Inez whispered. Harold, my husband, he's not who I thought he was. I never knew he was involved in anything like this. I understand, Mrs. Thompson, Detective Harris said gently. But you need to come to the station. We need to put the pieces together. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to find your children. Inez's mind spun. The world outside her seemed to fade away. Her husband had betrayed her. The man she had trusted with her life, her children, had made deals with the devil. She didn't know who to trust anymore. But she knew one thing. She couldn't stand by and do nothing. I'll be there, Inez said, her voice firm. I'll come to the station. As she hung up the phone, Inez felt a sense of dread settle over her. The truth was unraveling, and with it, the facade of her marriage. But at least now, she had a direction, a path to follow, and she would follow it no matter where it led. She grabbed her coat and purse, her mind focused on the mission ahead. But as she opened the door to leave, she was stopped by a soft voice behind her. Mom, Michael called from the hallway, his eyes wide with concern. Inez turned, offering him a tight smile. I'm going to the police station, Michael. I'm going to find your sisters. I'll bring them home. His face lit up with hope. You promise, Mom? I promise, she said, her voice steady, but filled with determination. As Inez stepped out into the cold air, the weight of her promise settled heavily on her shoulders. She had to find her babies. She would stop at nothing. But what would she uncover along the way? And what would happen when the truth about Harold finally came to light? The drive to the police station felt like it took forever. The steady hum of the car's engine was the only sound keeping Inez company as she tried to steady her nerves. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. But it wasn't just the stress of the situation that was making her anxious. It was the fact that she didn't know what awaited her at the station. The unknown felt like an oppressive weight pressing down on her chest. What would they tell her? How much had they learned? And what did Harold know about all of this? As she parked the car and stepped out, the brisk wind bit at her skin, but she hardly noticed. The chill in the air was nothing compared to the freezing feeling that had settled in her heart. The police station was an old building, its dark brick exterior making it seem even more intimidating. Inez had never been to a police station before, at least not for anything like this. Her breath caught in her throat as she pushed open the heavy door and walked inside. Detective Harris was waiting for her in a small, dimly lit room. He gestured for her to sit, his expression grim but calm. Inez took a deep breath and sat down, trying to keep her emotions in check. She couldn't afford to break down now. Mrs. Thompson, Detective Harris began, his voice steady, but filled with urgency. Thank you for coming in. We've been reviewing Harold's movements over the past few months, and I need to warn you, what we're dealing with here is much bigger than we initially thought. Inez's heart raced. What do you mean? What's really going on? Harris looked down at the files on the table, his fingers tapping nervously against the paper. Harold has been involved in some very serious criminal activity, Mrs. Thompson. He's been laundering money through various channels, and your children, well, they were part of his transactions. Inez's head spun. Her chest tightened. You mean my children? What are you saying? Where are they? Why would Harold use them? We believe your husband was trying to settle some debts, Harris continued, his voice low. Harold has been working with several unsavory characters, and we suspect that the twins were sold as part of an agreement with a powerful individual, someone who has a lot of influence and resources. This person goes by the name of Victor Novak. Inez's stomach churned at the name. She had never heard of this man, but the way Harris said it, the way his voice hardened, told her that Novak was not someone she wanted to be involved with. What does he want with my babies? Inez's voice shook, but she fought to keep it steady. What is he going to do with them? We're still trying to piece together the details, but it seems Novak has a network of people who use children for, let's just say, unspeakable things, Harris said, his face tight with disgust. That's why it's so important that we find them before it's too late. We don't know where they've been taken, but we have a lead. Novak was spotted leaving the area with 2 of Harold's associates. We're tracing their movements now. Inez felt as though she had been punched in the gut. No, this can't be happening. I don't understand. Why didn't Harold tell me? Harris looked at her with sympathy. I'm afraid Harold has been hiding a lot of things from you, Mrs. Thompson. This isn't just about money. This is about power. And Harold, he made some very dangerous choices. Tears welled up in Inez's eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't let herself cry now. Not when her babies were out there, in danger. What do I do? How do I help them? Harris leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. We need to get to Novak. He's the key to everything. If we can get to him, we can get your daughters back. But we need your help, Mrs. Thompson. Do you know anything about Harold's connections? Anyone who might know where Novak is? Inez's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. She thought back to the years she had spent with Harold, his friends, his associates, the people he kept in touch with. But there was one name that stood out, a name that Inez had heard mentioned in passing over the years, but never thought to take seriously. Lena, Inez said, the name escaping her lips before she even realized it. Lena Matthews. She was always around Harold. She worked with him at the office, but I never trusted her. Harris's expression darkened. Lena Matthews. That's a lead we can follow. She's been known to associate with Novak's people. We'll need to find her and get information. Inez's heart raced. Could Lena be the key to finding her children? Was she involved in this dark world? Inez didn't know, but one thing was certain. She had no choice but to follow every lead, no matter where it took her. She stood up, her resolve hardening. Then let's find her. Let's find my babies. As she walked out of the station, Inez felt a renewed sense of determination. She would find her daughters, no matter what it took. She had already lost too much, and she wasn't about to let them be lost forever. But as she stepped into the cold night air, something gnawed at her. Was Lena just another pawn in this twisted game, or was she hiding something far more dangerous? The drive to Lena Matthews' apartment was filled with a heavy silence. Inez's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more chaotic than the last. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. The weight of her children's disappearance hung over her like a dark cloud, and the more she thought about it, the harder it became to breathe. Lena Matthews. Inez had always known there was something off about her. Her cold smile, the way she always seemed to be lurking in the background when Harold had business meetings or social gatherings. But Inez never thought it would go this far. Lena was always so smooth, so well-spoken. How could someone like her be involved in something so monstrous? The apartment complex loomed ahead, its tall, gray walls reflecting the faint light from the street lamps. Inez parked and took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. She had to be strong. She had to do this for her daughters. No more hesitation. She rang the bell to Lena's apartment, her fingers shaking as she pressed the button. A few seconds passed before the door opened, revealing Lena standing in the doorway. She looked the same as always, well-groomed, her smile tight but professional. But this time, there was a coldness in her eyes that sent a chill down Inez's spine. Inez, Lena greeted her with a forced smile. What brings you here? I need to talk to you, Inez said, her voice steady, but her heart was pounding in her chest. We need to talk about Harold, about what he's been involved in. Lena raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. I'm not sure what you're implying. I know about the babies, Lena. I know Harold sold them. And I know you're involved in all of this. You've been working with Novak, haven't you? Inez demanded, her voice growing stronger with each word. Lena's eyes flickered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with her usual controlled demeanor. You're mistaken. I don't know what you're talking about. Inez stepped forward, her heart racing. Don't lie to me, Lena. I know you're mixed up in this, and I know you can help me find my daughters. You can help me end this. So, what's it going to be? Will you help me, or will you keep hiding behind your lies? For a moment, Lena said nothing. She just stood there, her expression hard as steel. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice low and cautious. You have no idea what you're asking, Inez. You think you can just waltz in here and demand answers? This is bigger than you think. You have no idea what Novak is capable of. He doesn't just take people's children for fun. This is a business, a dangerous one. And your husband, Harold, made his deal. Inez's breath hitched. What are you talking about? What kind of business could involve selling children? Lena stepped back, her gaze shifting nervously toward the hallway behind her, as though she was worried someone might overhear. She glanced back at Inez, her lips pressed into a thin line. There are things in this world that you don't understand. You've been living a lie, Inez. Everything you thought you knew about your husband, about your life, it was all part of his games. Inez's mind was reeling. The more Lena spoke, the more she felt like her entire world was unraveling. What are you saying? Tell me what Harold has done. Where are my daughters? Lena took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. I can't tell you everything, but I will tell you this. Novak's organization deals with more than just money. They deal with power, with influence. Children aren't just assets, they're leverage. Your daughters, they were part of an exchange. But they're not the only ones. There are more children, more families. Harold was in way over his head, Inez. And now you're in it too. Inez felt the room spin. Her legs felt weak, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse. You're telling me my children are just part of a deal? This is insane. Why didn't you stop him, Lena? Why didn't you help me? Lena's face softened for just a moment, but the hardness returned quickly. I tried. I wanted to help you, Inez. But there are rules, and I've broken enough of them already. I can't be the one to fix this. Novak will make sure of that. If you want your daughters back, you'll have to go to him directly. Inez stood there, frozen, as the weight of Lena's words hit her like a freight train. Go to Novak? Are you out of your mind? How am I supposed to even get to him? Lena shook her head, as if pitying Inez's ignorance. I can give you a name, but that's all I can do. It's up to you to decide what you want to do next. And I warn you, Inez, this is not a fight you can win alone. Before Inez could respond, Lena turned and quickly closed the door, leaving her standing there in shock. She had just been given the smallest sliver of hope, and yet, it felt like the darkness around her was closing in tighter than ever before. Novak. She had to face him. But how? What had Lena meant by a name? She turned and left the building, her mind a whirlwind of fear, anger, and determination. One thing was certain. She would find her daughters, even if it meant confronting the very man who had torn her family apart. But what would she do when she came face to face with Novak? And what price would she have to pay for her children's freedom? Inez couldn't shake the image of Lena's face from her mind. There had been something there, something behind the coldness. A flicker of regret, maybe even fear. But it was too late now. Lena had given her the first piece of the puzzle, but it was only a fraction of what she needed to find her daughters. Novak. That was the name that kept echoing in her mind. The man who had taken her babies, and the man who held the key to getting them back. Inez spent the entire drive home in silence, her mind racing with thoughts of Novak, Lena, and Harold. Her heart was still heavy with the realization that the life she thought she knew had been a lie. She had loved Harold with every ounce of her being, but now she was forced to see him for what he really was, a man who had sold his children for power, for money.
But why?
What had driven him to make such a decision? And what could he possibly owe to someone like Novak? When Inez got home, the house was empty. It had been that way for days. Michael had gone to stay with a friend, probably because he couldn't bear the tension that had built between them since the truth had come out. Inez knew she needed to act fast. Every minute she wasted was another minute that Novak could use to move her daughters further away from her. She walked into the living room, where her phone sat on the coffee table. She picked it up, staring at the screen, wondering who she could trust. The only number she knew she could call was Detective Harris. She dialed the number, her pulse quickening as it rang. Detective Harris, came the familiar voice on the other end. I need your help, Inez said, her voice tight with urgency. I've got a name. Novak. I need to find him. Do you have any leads? There was a long pause on the other end, and Inez's stomach twisted. Had he known about Novak all along? Had he been holding back information? Inez, Novak is not someone you want to get involved with, Harris finally said. We've been tracking him for months, but he's slippery. He has connections all over the place. We've got a few leads, but they're not solid. What makes you think you can find him when we can't? I don't care if you can't find him. I will. Inez snapped, her voice cold with determination. My children are out there, and I will do whatever it takes to bring them back. I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm doing it for them. I understand, Harris said after a pause. You're right. This is about your children. I'll put the word out, but I need you to stay safe, Inez. You don't know what you're walking into. Inez hung up the phone before he could say more. She didn't need his warnings. She didn't need anyone's help. She was going to do this alone if she had to. As she paced around the living room, she realized she needed more information. Lena had mentioned a name, but she had refused to elaborate. Inez thought back to their conversation. Maybe there was something more that Lena wasn't telling her. Perhaps there was someone else in the picture, someone who knew how to get to Novak. Inez's phone buzzed in her hand. It was a text message from an unknown number. You're looking for Novak. I can help. Meet me tonight at 8. I'll be at the old warehouse on Main. Come alone. Inez felt her heart skip a beat. She had no idea who this was, but it didn't matter. This was the lead she had been waiting for. She didn't think twice before typing back, I'll be there. The hours leading up to the meeting felt like an eternity. Inez couldn't sit still. She spent the time gathering what little she could, an old flashlight, her phone, and her car keys. It was all she had. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her started. When the clock finally struck 8, Inez left the house, her nerves on edge. She drove to the warehouse, her headlights cutting through the darkness as the building loomed in front of her. It was an abandoned structure, the windows shattered, and the door hanging off its hinges. Inez's instinct screamed at her to turn around, but she ignored them. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She parked her car a few feet away from the warehouse and stepped out. The night air was cool, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel beneath her boots. As she walked toward the building, she could see a figure standing in the shadows, waiting. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes narrowing. You must be Inez, the man said, his voice low and gravelly. I have information about your daughters, but you'll need to listen carefully. Inez's breath caught in her throat. What do you know? Where are they? What's going on? The man stepped closer, his face just visible in the dim light. Novak has them, yes. But that's just the beginning. You need to understand what you're dealing with. This is bigger than just your family. Bigger than you can even imagine. Inez's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? What is he doing with them? The man's eyes flickered to the side, as if checking to see if anyone was listening. Novak doesn't just deal in money. He deals in power. And your daughters? They're the key to something much more dangerous than you realize. Inez stepped forward, desperation creeping into her voice. What do you mean? What do I have to do to get them back? The man looked at her one last time, his face unreadable. You'll need to make a choice. A choice that will change everything. You can't save them without sacrificing something in return. Inez's heart pounded as the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. She was left standing there, alone, with only his words echoing in her mind. What was this choice? What could she possibly give up to get her children back? Inez stood frozen in the cold night air, the man's cryptic words ringing in her ears. A choice that will change everything. What could that possibly mean? What choice was she going to have to make, and what could she sacrifice to save her daughters? Her mind raced, her thoughts swirling as she made her way back to the car. The warehouse loomed behind her, dark and empty, the silence pressing down on her chest. She wanted answers, but the more she learned, the more questions surfaced. Every step she took toward Novak seemed to lead her further into a web of darkness and lies. She wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. As Inez drove back home, her heart heavy with uncertainty, she kept replaying the man's words over and over. She couldn't help but wonder, what would she be willing to sacrifice for her daughters? And more importantly, what had Harold gotten them all into? The house felt even emptier when she returned. She had expected Michael to be home, but there was no sign of him. The absence was suffocating, making everything seem more real. The gravity of the situation finally started to hit her. She wasn't just fighting for her children's freedom. She was up against an entire network of criminals, a man who had already shown he was willing to destroy families for his own gain. She had to make a choice, but she didn't know if she was strong enough to face what that might mean. She sank down onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. Crying wouldn't help her now. She had to think, had to be smart. Her daughters were depending on her. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, startling her out of her thoughts. She looked down at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a message from an unknown number. "I know where they are. Novak's hideout.
Come alone.
Midnight." The message was short, direct, and in a way it was exactly what she had been waiting for. But the warning was clear: come alone. She didn't know if this was a trap, but it was the only lead she had. It was her chance to get closer to Novak, to find out exactly what he was doing with her daughters. Inez didn't hesitate. She grabbed her jacket, her hands trembling slightly as she gathered her courage. This was it. She had to go now. The hours until midnight seemed to stretch on forever, each second filled with dread and anticipation. Inez drove through the empty streets, the quiet hum of the car doing little to ease her nerves. Her mind kept racing, wondering what awaited her at Novak's hideout. What was he planning? Why was her family being used as pawns in his game? When she arrived at the address the message had provided, her heart sank. The building was an abandoned warehouse, much like the one she had visited earlier. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. She parked the car and stepped out, her breath fogging in the cold night air. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, but she couldn't.
Not now.
She walked toward the entrance, every step echoing in the emptiness. Her heart was pounding in her chest as she reached for the door handle, her fingers trembling. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, stepping inside. The room was vast and dark, save for a single dim light hanging from the ceiling. There, in the center of the room, stood a figure. A man, tall and imposing, his back to her. Inez's pulse quickened. This was it. Novak. "Come closer," he said, his voice deep and calm, sending a chill down her spine. Inez didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the man who had taken her children from her. As she approached, he turned to face her. His cold eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, she saw nothing but darkness in them. "You must be Inez," Novak said, his lips curling into a slight smile. "You're much braver than I gave you credit for. But bravery isn't enough, you know. There's always a price to pay." Inez didn't speak. She couldn't. The anger inside her was too overwhelming. How dare this man stand there, so smug, after everything he had done? After everything he had taken from her? "I want my daughters back," Inez said, her voice steady, though her insides were trembling with fury. "You've taken everything from me. I don't care what it costs. I'll do whatever it takes to get them back." Novak raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "You'll do whatever it takes, huh? That's an interesting proposition. You see, I've been watching you, Mrs. Thompson. You're strong, more than most women would be in your position. But strength alone won't be enough to bring your daughters home. You'll need to be willing to make a choice." "What kind of choice?" Inez demanded, her voice trembling with frustration. "What is it you want from me?" He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I want your loyalty, Inez. I want you to work for me. Your husband made a deal with me, but he's proven to be weak. I need someone with conviction, someone who can handle the business, the power that comes with it. Your family can be part of something much bigger, much more profitable. But first, I need you to prove that you're willing to make a sacrifice." Inez's heart dropped. "Sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice are you talking about?" Novak smiled again, and it made Inez's skin crawl. "You want your daughters back? You'll have to choose. Your loyalty to your family or loyalty to me. That's the price, Mrs. Thompson. What will you give up to get them back?" Inez's breath caught in her throat. She had thought she was prepared for anything, but this was a line she hadn't expected to cross. Was this what Lena meant by a choice? What was she willing to sacrifice to get her children back? Her integrity? Her soul? Novak's cold eyes never left hers as he waited for her answer. Inez knew she had to make a choice, one that would change everything. Inez stood in the dim light, Novak's cold gaze pinning her to the spot, as if his very presence was draining the warmth from her body. She was no longer just a mother desperate to save her children. She was being asked to make a choice that could tear her apart, and she wasn't sure if she had the strength to make it. Your loyalty to your family or loyalty to me, Novak's words echoed in her mind, like a curse. What did it even mean to be loyal to someone like him? A man who traded lives like commodities, who used power and influence to manipulate others for his own gain. She could barely stomach the thought. But her daughters. Her heart twisted painfully as she thought of them. Two innocent little girls, no older than 5, trapped in a world they had no place in. They were in the hands of a man who cared nothing for them, a man who could do anything to them, and Inez knew that every second she wasted here could be another minute of suffering for them. "I want my daughters back," Inez said, the words tearing through her throat, raw and urgent. "I don't care about your power. I don't care about anything but them. If you have them, you'll let them go."
Now.
Novak chuckled softly, the sound dark and mocking. "It's not that simple, Mrs. Thompson. You misunderstand. What I'm offering you is more than just your children. What I'm offering is a place, power, control, the ability to make decisions that could change the world. You think you're in control of this situation, but you're not. You're only as powerful as the choices you're willing to make. And right now, you're not showing me that you're willing to make the hard choices." Inez took a deep breath, steadying herself. She couldn't let him see her doubt. She couldn't show him fear. He wanted to break her, to twist her into someone she wasn't, but she wouldn't let him. She would not give him that satisfaction. "I've already made my choice," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "My family, my children, will always come first. No amount of power, no amount of wealth will ever change that." Novak's smile faltered, just for a moment, before it returned, cold and calculating. "You really believe that, don't you? But you've underestimated the cost. You can't have both. You can't have your family and your dignity. The world doesn't work that way." Inez's chest tightened, but she refused to let him get to her. "I'm not interested in your world. I just want my daughters. You took them from me, and I'm going to get them back." Novak's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something, almost like respect, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "I admire your spirit. It's rare, and it's what makes this so interesting. But you're wrong if you think you can just walk out of here and get what you want. You're already too deep in this game. There's no easy way out, Inez." Before she could respond, Novak turned toward a set of double doors at the far end of the room, motioning for her to follow. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you what you're really up against." Inez hesitated for only a moment, her heart pounding. What was he going to show her? What more could he possibly say to make this worse? But she followed him. The cold steel doors creaked open as they walked into a darkened hallway. The walls were lined with pictures. Grains of dust danced in the faint light from overhead. Each door they passed had a thick, locked padlock, as though sealing away the ghosts of the past. Novak stopped in front of one particular door and, without a word, opened it. The room beyond was cold, but not empty. Inez's eyes darted around, her heart racing as she took in the scene. There, in a small cot, lay her twins, wrapped in blankets, sound asleep. They were safe. They were alive. But the sight of them, in this place, surrounded by shadows, made Inez's breath catch in her throat. "You see," Novak said softly, stepping into the room beside her, his voice almost gentle. "This is what I can offer you. A place for them, a future where they are safe, where they have everything they could ever want. All you need to do is accept the reality of your situation. Accept who you are. Accept the power that can be yours." Inez took a step forward, her heart swelling as she gazed down at her daughters. They looked so small, so innocent, unaware of the danger they had narrowly escaped. Her entire being screamed to run to them, to hold them in her arms, but she didn't move. Not yet. I don't want your power, she said, her voice breaking as she spoke, her emotions raw and unguarded. I just want them back. I want them safe. Novak's gaze was cold, but there was something else there now. Something dangerous. You don't get to choose, Inez. You never have. You're already part of this world now. The moment you stepped into my game, you became just like the rest of us. You'll do whatever it takes to keep your family safe. That's the choice you'll make. The real question is, how far are you willing to go to get them back? The room seemed to close in on Inez as she looked at her daughters, her heart torn between what she had to do and the love she had for them. What was she willing to sacrifice? What would she give up to save them? Inez stood in that dimly lit room, the world outside falling away as she focused solely on her daughters. They were alive. They were safe.
For now.
But the weight of Novak's words pressed down on her like 1,000 tons of stone. How far are you willing to go to get them back? The question circled her mind, over and over, until it felt like it would break her. She had already lost so much. Her trust, her family, her sense of security, all of it had been taken from her. Now, she was standing at the edge of a precipice, with only one way forward, through the darkness. I don't want your power, she repeated, her voice hoarse with emotion, her heart still racing. I want my daughters. Novak studied her for a long moment, his eyes calculating. Then, without a word, he stepped back and closed the door behind them, leaving the room with her daughters, the faint sound of their soft breathing the only comfort in this hellish place. You don't understand yet, Inez, Novak said, his voice colder now. Your daughters are in the safest place they'll ever be, and they'll stay that way as long as you do what I say. You think this is about power, but it's about control. Control over everything and everyone around you. And your family, your daughters, they're just pawns in this game. Inez's stomach twisted with revulsion.
Pawns.
Her children, her flesh and blood, were nothing more than pieces on a chessboard in Novak's sick game. You think I'll just roll over and accept this? Inez said, her voice rising in defiance. You think you can break me that easily? I will do anything to get my daughters back. I'll fight you if I have to. I'll make you regret this. Novak smiled again, that cold, empty smile that made her blood run cold. You're already regretting it, Mrs. Thompson. But you're too far gone to turn back now. The question is, how far are you willing to go? Inez stood there, chest heaving, fighting the rage that bubbled up inside her. She wanted to lash out, to scream at him, to run to her daughters and take them away from this nightmare. But she knew, deep down, that doing that would only make things worse. If she made a move now, she could risk everything.
No.
I have to be smarter. I have to be stronger. I'll play your game, Novak, she said through gritted teeth. But don't think for a second that I'll ever be loyal to you. I'll get my daughters back, no matter the cost. For the first time, Novak's expression softened, just slightly. He regarded her for a long moment, his gaze piercing. Then he nodded, almost approvingly. Very well, Inez. You've made your choice. But remember, every choice has a consequence. And when this is all over, you'll understand the price of playing in my world. Inez didn't respond. She turned on her heel and walked away, her mind racing, her heart still heavy with the weight of her promise. She had entered a world she had never known, a world of darkness and manipulation. But she was no longer afraid. She wasn't going to back down, not now. As she made her way to the exit, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Michael. Mom, where are you? I'm scared. Please come home. I miss you. Her heart ached at the simple words. Her son was scared. He was alone, and she wasn't there to protect him. Inez quickly typed back, her fingers trembling. I'm coming home soon, Michael. Stay safe. I love you. She pressed send and shoved the phone back into her pocket. The love she had for her children, her family, was all she had left. No matter what happened from here on out, she wouldn't stop fighting for them. She couldn't. Inez stepped outside into the night. The the cold air biting at her skin, and for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what Novak was planning or how deep this all went, but she was going to get her daughters back. She was going to fight for them, no matter what it cost. But what would Novak do next? How would he use her in his game? And more importantly, who could she trust in a world full of lies? Inez didn't sleep that night. The weight of her decision, the choices she had made, and the weight of everything she was about to face kept her awake, her mind spinning with thoughts of Novak, her daughters, and the uncertain future that awaited her. She sat in the darkness, staring at the empty space where her family should have been. Michael's face flashed in her mind, his desperate message, and the pain of her own helplessness. She knew she couldn't stay in this place any longer, stuck in this nightmare. The only way out was to take action, to end this once and for all. She wasn't sure how, but she knew she had to get her daughters back. It didn't matter what Novak had said, how he'd tried to scare her with his power and manipulation. Inez had been pushed to her limit. Her love for her children had become her weapon. It was all she had left. But what was her next move? The question haunted her as she drove back to the place that had once been her home, the house now more of a prison than a sanctuary. She needed to regroup, to figure out how she would take on the powerful man who had torn her family apart. When she arrived, Michael was waiting for her, pacing nervously in the doorway. His eyes brightened when he saw her, relief washing over him. "Mom, you're back," he said, rushing to hug her. Inez held him tight, her arms around him almost desperately. "I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere, Michael. I'm not leaving you again." She pulled back to look at him, his face still so full of fear. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted you to go through this. I promised I'd protect you, and I will. I'm going to get your sisters back." "I know you will, Mom," Michael said, his voice steady, despite the fear in his eyes. "You're strong. You'll do it." Inez took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. "We need to make a plan. I don't know exactly what Novak's next move will be, but we have to be ready. We need to think strategically, not just react." "I'll do whatever it takes to help," Michael said, his tone resolute. Inez smiled faintly. "You've already helped more than you know." She glanced around the house, her gaze lingering on the empty spaces where family memories used to live. "Now it's time to get them back. We're not letting him win." As she sat down with Michael, they began to discuss their options. They needed to find out where Novak was keeping the twins. Inez had no intention of walking into Novak's hideout blindly. This time, she would be ready. She needed leverage, something that would make Novak back down, something that would give her the upper hand. And then, when the moment came, she'd strike. They spent hours mapping out what they knew, what little information they had, piecing together the puzzle bit by bit. But as the night wore on, a nagging feeling began to grow in the pit of Inez's stomach. She couldn't shake the thought that they were running out of time. If Novak had made a deal with her husband, then he had resources, connections that reached far beyond what Inez could comprehend. But Inez wasn't backing down. She couldn't afford to. The stakes had never been higher. Her children were at risk, and she wasn't going to let them be pawns in someone else's game any longer. Just before dawn, as the first light began to spill through the curtains, Inez made her decision. "I'm going to confront Novak," she said, her voice filled with a fierce determination. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to end this. I'm going to bring my daughters home." Michael stood up, his face serious. "Mom, be careful. Please. You can't do this alone. Let me help you." Inez smiled at him, her heart full of love. "You've helped more than you know, Michael. But this is something I have to do. You're strong, but this fight is mine. It's always been mine. And I will do whatever it takes to get them back." She kissed Michael on the forehead and turned to leave the room. As she did, she glanced at the picture of her family on the wall, before all of this started. Before Harold's betrayal, before Novak's monstrous actions. She would never stop fighting for them. She had already lost so much, her trust, her peace, her marriage. But she was done losing. It was time to take control. The next step was dangerous, but it was one she had to take. For her daughters. For her family. She reached for her phone and dialed Detective Harris. He picked up after 2 rings. Inez. I need your help, she said, her voice resolute. I figured out where Novak is. I'm going after him. There was a long pause on the other end. Inez, this isn't something you should be doing alone. He's too dangerous. You're walking into a trap. I don't have a choice, Inez said firmly. I need to do this. And I need you to back me up. Harris sighed, but there was a note of respect in his voice. All right, we'll help you, but you need to stay safe. This is bigger than we thought, Inez. If you go after Novak, there's no turning back. I'm already past that point, Inez said. I'll see you soon. With that, she hung up the phone and headed out the door, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. But in her heart, there was a burning determination. She was done being afraid, done being manipulated, done being a pawn. It was time to make Novak regret ever crossing her path. The moment of truth is almost here. Hit like, comment, and subscribe. What will Inez do next? Can she defeat Novak and save her daughters? Let us know your predictions below. The day had come. Inez could feel it in her bones, in the air around her. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment where she would confront the man who had taken everything from her and show him what it truly meant to mess with a mother's love. Novak wouldn't know what hit him. Inez stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her jacket, trying to steady her breathing. Her mind was clear, focused. She was no longer the woman who had blindly trusted her husband, who had let her life be dictated by fear and submission. She was a mother on a mission, and nothing was going to stop her. She looked at her reflection one last time, her gaze hard, determined. This wasn't just about saving her daughters anymore. It was about reclaiming her life, her family, and her dignity. And she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. Inez picked up the phone and called Detective Harris. I'm heading in now, she said, her voice steady but with an edge of urgency. Make sure you're ready. I'm going straight to Novak's compound. I don't have time to waste. Be careful, Inez, Harris warned, his voice filled with concern. We don't know exactly what's waiting for you. Novak's people are dangerous. You won't be able to do this alone. I won't be alone, Inez said, the words coming out sharper than she had intended. I have something he doesn't. I have everything to lose. He doesn't. And that's going to make all the difference. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Harris finally spoke again. All right, we'll be waiting. Just stay safe. With a deep breath, Inez hung up the phone and stepped out of her house. Her car was already waiting, the engine running. She had made her decision. This was the end. Either she would bring her daughters home or die trying. She wouldn't let them be another victim in Novak's twisted game. The drive to Novak's compound was long, but the roads felt empty, silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Every turn she made, every mile she drove, only served to fuel the fire burning inside her. When she arrived, the compound loomed before her. Massive gates, high walls, and armed guards at every corner. It was a fortress, a place where power was king, and Inez was the outsider, the weak link. She didn't hesitate. She parked her car at the entrance and approached the gates, her heart pounding in her chest. There was no turning back now. This was it. The guards eyed her as she walked up, but she didn't flinch. She knew what she had to do. She was ready to take whatever they threw at her. I'm here to see Novak, she said, her voice commanding. The guards exchanged wary glances, unsure of how to respond. Inez didn't give them time to think. She stepped forward, her eyes cold, unwavering. She wasn't going to beg for anything. She wasn't going to let them intimidate her. I'm here for my daughters, she added, her voice steady, unyielding. And I'll get them back, with or without your help. The guards reluctantly stepped aside, their hands hovering over their weapons, but not daring to draw them. Inez walked past them, her eyes scanning every inch of the compound. She had no idea where Novak was, but she would find him. He was the only thing standing between her and her children. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of generators and the occasional crackle of a radio. Inez's footsteps echoed in the empty hallways as she moved deeper into the compound. Her instincts were on high alert, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't let fear control her now. She reached a large door at the end of the hallway. Behind it, she could feel Novak's presence, a sense of control and power that seemed to permeate the air itself. She could almost taste it. Inez took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside, she found herself face to face with Novak. He was seated at a large desk, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the wood. His cold eyes met hers, and for a moment, he said nothing. "I knew you'd come," he said, his voice low and filled with amusement. "You've been persistent, I'll give you that." "I'm here for my daughters," Inez said, her voice unwavering, even as her heart raced. "You have no right to them. Let them go." Novak's smile was slow, mocking. "You still don't understand, do you, Inez? This is bigger than you, bigger than your children. You think you're here to make demands, but you're not. You're a pawn in a game you don't even fully comprehend." "I don't care about your game," Inez spat. "I care about my daughters, and I'm taking them back. You think you can just walk in here and take them?" Novak chuckled, a dark, unsettling sound. "You're not the one in control, Inez. You never were." Inez took a step forward, her fists clenched at her sides. "I don't need control. I need my children." Novak stood up slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "And what will you do to get them, Inez? What will you sacrifice?" Inez's breath caught in her throat. She knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to break her, trying to make her question herself, her choices.
But she was beyond that now.
She had nothing left to lose. "I've already made my sacrifice," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "I gave up my trust, my peace, my life. But not my family, not my daughters. You're going to release them. Now." There was a long silence. Novak's eyes flickered, just for a moment, and in that instant, Inez knew. She had won. The power she thought she had lost, her love for her children, was the very thing that had made her unstoppable. And Novak? He had underestimated her. A tense silence filled the room as Novak finally spoke, his voice tight with anger. "You think you've won? This isn't over, Inez." But before he could say another word, Inez rushed forward, her hand outstretched toward the door where her daughters had been kept. The guards, sensing the shift in the room, hesitated for a moment, just long enough for Inez to reach the door. When the door swung open, the sight before her was everything she had dreamed of. Her daughters were there, their eyes wide with fear, but alive. Safe. The choice had been made, and Inez had won.